Hey everybody, this is Nick Singh, and you are now listening to Autographs. You know, when you stop looking for acceptance and you just enjoy your life, the whole game changes.
You have to understand yourself, and I think the real answer is real giving. Is that I don't understand why people don't get that if you give purely, you get.
We get good at what we do the most of. You nurture the process of going to yourself and listening to yourself, and you get very good at honing your own intuition.
Did I actually make people stop and go, whoa, humans are capable of more than I thought? If you're great at a certain skill and you can then put that skill to use to help somebody else, that's fulfillment.
My hope is that this show inspires you to just feel like you can just be yourself, have fun, and enjoy your life too. So enjoy and take care out there.
I mean, I just wanted to say that, to you personally, I've been spending a tremendous amount of time with your work all week. I've actually spent a lot of time with your work just on my television screen. For those of you who don't know, I'm sitting with Aravind, Krishnaswamy. Is that how I say it?
Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic. He's a fine art nature photographer, and his images have appeared on almost all large-scale platforms. And if you're listening to this, when you're just watching Apple TV or Google Chromecast and you're not actually watching TV, but there's a slideshow of images on the screen, that's where Aravind's work often gets picked up. And I see on his Instagram that a lot of people will search for certain photos from him. And I don't know if you're like me, but I've just sat with the images for a really long time. And every single time they come up, I, look to the people around me. I say, oh my God, is that not beautiful? And Google started doing this lovely thing is they started listing the photographer in the bottom right corner, and your name just kept on coming up. And I realized that there's a select few photographers they use for these images, and you are one of them. And your work has brought me so much peace, and it's really reminded me of what matters in life. And I'm not sure if you intended it to do that, but it's had that effect on me. And I wanted to say thank you. And, to me, this episode is a little bit off the beaten trail. I typically sit down with CEOs and we talk business, but this episode is going to be different. It's going to be about something that's much more close to my heart, which is art. And this is an episode about photography. It's about producing art that moves people and finding and preserving the meaning in your work, despite the multiple clamors for your attention that happen throughout the day. So, Aravind, thank you for being here. I'm not sure if I did your intro justice. I'm sure I missed a bunch, but I just wanted to say thanks.
Well, no, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for all the kind words and the kind comments. It's what I've been trying to do with my photographic work is get it out there and get people to feel and appreciate the majesty and beauty that's out there. So it's awesome that you find it useful and valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I really have. I think you're underselling it, but it really is stunning. And so if you want to, and by the way, if it's okay with you, on this episode on the visual screen, and also a link in the bio, your website for people to enjoy your photos, I might ask you for a few stills after this that I could just play on a slideshow on YouTube. It's okay if you're not able to give them away, but just so I can show people and celebrate your work. And so if you're watching on YouTube, look out for that. That might be there. But that being said, it's nice to meet you, man. I know this is our first time connecting, and it's always, interesting connecting in live time on a show. It's recorded. It's like, oh shit, what do I say? But I wanted to ask, what did you think when I reached out? Have you done a lot of these before? Have people done this before and reach out to you via email about your work? Or
Yeah, I mean, I do get a bunch of folks reaching out through email or through Instagram about the work. Oftentimes, it's usually to ask, hey, where was that photo taken? Or I saw this photo on my TV somewhere. Where was it taken? Or a lot of times I actually get outreach from other artists who want to use it to produce other work. You wouldn't believe the number of times people want to have take a photo and then paint, make a painting that's kind of inspired by that photo. So there's a lot of outreach like that happens. But you're actually the first podcaster that's reached out about the photos. I've done some podcasts way back in the day, especially some business related stuff, but this is the first one on photography.
Fantastic. And I'm glad to be, the first podcast on photography. And by the way, when folks reach out and they ask to, remake your work in a painting, are you one to celebrate that, or do you treat your artists like, no, I don't want anybody to touch it?
Absolutely. I think it's an absolute honor that somebody wants to take a photograph and wants to make a new piece of art out of it. For me, that's what photography is about. It's a medium for artists and for expressing emotion, for expressing yourself. And so the fact that somebody wants to take that and then build on top of it, I think it's the greatest compliment you could get. So I'm delighted every time I see one of those.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I also understand that right now you're calling from the Valley, right? You're calling from Silicon Valley in California.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
is art and photography, is this something you do full time? I'm assuming not if you live in the Valley. I was mentioning earlier before we started recording, it's a bit of an odd place for a photographer to live. And you said, oh, it's because I work in technology. And so it began to make sense. So, well, what exactly do you do?
Yeah, so I work at Google. I'm an engineering leader at Google. I've had an interesting kind of intertwining of art and technology over the years. I've lived here in San Jose in the heart of Silicon Valley for 18 years. I moved out here 18 years ago for primarily for work. But I've been photographing for about the same amount of time. And so my initial part of my career, I actually ended up having a pretty close intertwining of photography and technology because I was at Adobe. I worked for Adobe for 6 years. I've had a brief stint on Photoshop. There might even be some parts of Lightroom that might have been touched by me.
What do you
And
do?
that's where
What do you do for these companies? I mean, do you work in like an artistic department, or are you on the tech side?
No, I'm a software engineer, so I'm a software engineer by background, and I wrote code. So I at Adobe I wrote code in Photoshop, worked in Adobe Research, worked in trying to figure out new kind of computational photography techniques, stuff like that, and that's what I did. And then about 11 years ago, I came to Google, and also kind of that photography trend continued. I came to Google. I joined Google Plus Photos. Ended up getting together with a bunch of folks, creating Google Photos, and worked on Google Photos for many years. Ran engineering for Google Photos, and that's that was kind of the perfect meld of the photographic interest, the artistic interest, and then also kind of bringing that to a consumer product that can go out and make people's photo lives better.
That's unbelievable. So, and I'm assuming that's most of how you got your photos on Google, being working at Google. Is that about right, or
Yeah, it's been an evolution over the years. So where this all started at Google was way back in the Google Plus days. So when Google Plus was still the social network that we were trying to get off the ground,
were you a part of
what
that team?
I was a part of the team. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, for about 2 years or so before it became into Google Photos.
Got it.
So yeah, I was a part of that team, and what we were trying to do was actually we had this feature called featured photos. We wanted to get photos from the broader community and be able to showcase them. And so that's where this all started, and then be able to showcase them and put them with the Chromecast, which also came out at around that 2012
I
timeframe.
love my
And
Chromecast. Like I don't like it's just the best. I love it.
what do you love about it? Let me ask you a question.
What do I love about it? Well, actually, frankly, sometimes it's a pain in the ass, but it's the reason I like it is I mean, my options are limited. You got Fire Stick. I'm up here in Canada. We got Apple TV. Apple TV, just the remote is really glitchy, and it's like two within the Apple universe. I don't think Apple does a good job on connected TVs. I think Google crushes it. I just picked up a new one, and just the platform and the dashboard that it gives you right up front. It's super easy to connect to your accounts. That's what I love about it.
Awesome. I love hearing that because after I was kind of done with photos and figured out, I kind of want to do something else. I went on and joined the Google TV team. So I spent the last 5 years helping to build the Chromecast with Google TV. So that's kind of another evolution, right?
Man, you guys crush it. My only can I tell you my qualms? I'm going to use this as like
Do
a
it.
technical support suggestion box. Are you ready?
Oh yeah, go for it.
One is that not all the OTT apps from Paramount Plus, etc., have the Google Chromecast readily available. In Canada, we have an app called Crave. It's how we get HBO. And
Yeah.
sometimes it disappears, and you're just like, where the hell to go? And you got to like open up and close the app like 20 times for it to show up. And I don't know if it's Crave. I don't know if it's you. It's probably Crave. And then secondly, if you're watching something for a long enough time on Chromecast, and then you go back on the app. Let's say I'm watching something on Netflix. anybody listening, this is totally turning into a qualm about something I use every day. I watch way too much TV. So, Aravind, thanks for doing this. I'm totally down to just like get your team on this call and let's get to it. But every now and again, it times out. You know, you're watching Netflix and then you come back to Netflix and you're like, oh, I can't rewind or anything. It forgot that I was watching on Chromecast, and it's just like a janky thing to connect. Between those are my only two things that it bugs. But most of that got solved once you guys came with this remote. Finally, it has a remote. I'm not doing it from my phone, and so I'm sure this was intentional.
Yeah, that's right. I'm glad to hear that you're enjoying it and that overall the product works for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I appreciate all you've done to build it. So thank you. I had no idea I was going to be talking to the guy that helped build Chrome.
So back to the kind of the story of how all this came about. So back in the Google Plus days, we were trying to see if we can get featured photos from all the artists that were out there. Like Google Plus was resonating with photographers, and so it was really building a community around it, and that's where it started. And then after about 2014, when Google Plus, it was kind of clear that like it wasn't going to be a consumer social network, and we're going to kind of pivot and wind it down. We found that for a lot of the people that were appreciating these images that were as a part of that screensaver, like that needed to continue, that needed to be there. And so the team that was responsible for doing that decided they're going to have to figure out a way to do it, but they didn't have a social network to go lean on to get all of these photographers to be able to contribute content to it. And at the same time, they realized, hey, there's a lot of photographers that work at Google. Google's a big company. It's a very global company. And there's a lot of people that really love the art of photography. And so what they did was they just threw it out to inside of the company to say, hey, anybody who wants to contribute images that is going to go up on these screens, and there's a bunch of guidelines that they have for what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, go ahead and do it. And so every year they put out a call, and a bunch of people throw their photos in there, and then they go through and figure out which ones are we going to showcase and which ones we're not. And so I've just been fortunate that I've had a bunch of my photos show up. I don't have any control over deciding.
What are you buying your manager a bunch of Starbucks every day to?
No, I don't. There's no shenanigans there. It's open. It's open to everybody. And I've just been very fortunate that they've over the years selected several of my photos to appear in there.
I mean, I'm glad about it too. I do wish that they just had no guidelines for the photos, and you would see people's like gym selfies and mirror selfies and the whole thing. It would just be a total chaos and a total mess and a total fun thing to do. But interesting. If it's all right with you, I want to dive into photography, and I'm fascinated by your career at Google. I had no idea that you worked there. In fact, I was doing research and I kept on every single time I typed your name into Google, your LinkedIn profile would come up, and I'd say, oh, this guy looks a lot like the Aravind Krishnaswamy, the photographer. And then it just by the way, did you go to the University of Waterloo? Is that you?
I did. Yeah.
Oh, so I'm actually from Canada, and I currently live I'm assuming you're from Canada.
Yeah.
Where are you from in Canada?
So I grew up in Alberta.
Yep.
And then I went out to school in Waterloo. I was out there for 8 years. So
that's fantastic. I mean, I went to Guelph. I went to the University of Toronto for a bit. I grew up in Oakville. I'm assuming you know the area quite well. I'm currently in Hamilton or Ancaster, if you know where that is. But yeah, exactly. And so
I've still got a ton of family out there. So my sister lives out there. My wife's family lives out there. So we we still have the connection, the Canadian connection back.
That's great. Next time you're out here, if you're ever shooting photography and you want a buddy to come bring you coffee and hold your gear, I'm totally in for it. So just shoot me a note, and I'd love to piggyback on that. But I kept on seeing this Aravind Krishnaswamy show up on LinkedIn. I was like, no, that's not him. And it turned out that it was you the entire time. And so I ignored your LinkedIn and all my research, but that was my own blunder. My first question is broader, and then I just want to get into photo stories, man. Like the photos that you take, they just fascinate me, and I'd love to talk about some stories behind it. So I've chosen, if you don't mind, some selects that are my favorites. I haven't had a chance to look at your whole library. It's massive. And then I asked you for one of your favorites, which I'm really excited to show people. I was surprised to see that was one of your favorites, so I'm excited to hear about why. But my first question is broader, and it's I get a bunch and a lot of meaning and intention and presence from your work. And I wanted to know, is that just me, or what is your intention when you're shooting these images? It feels like presence just exudes from it. And call me esoteric or spiritual, which I am. I think that people, believe it or not, can feel when you've put care into something, and they feel when you've put love and intention into something. And that's what I get from your work. And I'm curious to know, is that what you put in, and what is your intention when you go out?
Yeah, yeah. It's something that that I spend a lot of time thinking about as well, and spend a lot of time thinking about like why why do I do this? Why do I want to head out? Why like why, right? Because it's always been this driving force. I mean, I've been doing it for 18 years. Could have stopped anywhere along the line, but there's been something that's been kind of continuing to motivate and drive it forward. And I I think the main thing for me is I enjoy the process more than necessarily the output. So I'm not necessarily thinking about, oh, I have to get a particular kind of a photograph, or I have to, I'm on a like a commission to go and document something. Like those things aren't true. So I'm really going out for the creative process and how that makes me feel when I'm out there, and how different that is from my other things in my day-to-day life, especially when you're working in technology and in business. It's a very different mental state that it puts your mind in, and that's what I go after. And then I think that then starts to come out in the work. So my work focuses on two things. There's the wildlife stuff, which is I think a bit more obvious in terms of like the intention there, which is really to show the majesty, the beauty, of our planet, of the wildlife in our planet, of I think the fact that just because it's wildlife and just because it's another species doesn't mean that there's a difference in being able to connect, with them, and that's kind of the intention behind a lot of the wildlife photos. And then there's more of the kind of landscape abstract, and especially on the landscape side of it, it's a lot of like intimate, landscape stuff as opposed to the really big, grand landscape stuff. I've done a bunch of that, in the past as well, but especially these days, what I'm focusing on is the intimate stuff. It's the more abstract stuff, and there the intention and the thing that I'm trying to do is to be able to produce art and make something in conditions that don't have to be special. So, like in conditions where I don't have to have all of the right clouds, and it doesn't have to be exactly at sunset or sunrise. You don't have to have all these big, beautiful colors that nature is producing for you. Instead, it's being able to find beauty and being able to find art in the relative mundane, in the things that you might just walk by, or I might have just walked by, 2 years or 3 years ago. And that's where the process of doing that ends up being more important necessarily than even the outcome. But then what I found is just by doing that over and over again, I go back and I revisit and I look at the photos that I've made, and I start to get kind of lost in thinking through like what else am I seeing here than just the most obvious thing. So that's yeah, that's how I think about it.
I really resonate with all that. I have a bunch to ask you, and for anybody listening to this, what I picked up from that was that your North Star is really what you connect with. It sounds like, Aravind,
Yeah.
and for those of you listening and not watching, Aravind's nodding right now, and I've learned over the course of my life. I'm at a place. I'm 28, and I'm at a place with art, which is really close to my heart. I see myself as an artist. That the idea of purpose and doing work that matters to you is sometimes an overdone conversation. It's a really beautiful and important conversation, but at times it's overdone. And I really believe that your highest impact will be found right after you go after the thing that you enjoy the most and you connect with the most and that excites you the most and that interests you the most. You and I both could volunteer at soup kitchens for the rest of our lives, and it'd be very beautiful work. But I do genuinely think that our impact is stronger when we follow the things that we connect with and that excite us. And I want to tell you, person to person, what you've done is really translated through images. It's actually why I reached out. I've seen a lot of people shoot over the years, and my background's in creative direction, it is in production. And so I've had the privilege of spending a lot of time with creative work. And there's a reason I reached out and yours jumped out at me. Something I would love for you to build on that if you have any points, but something I want to ask you about your time and your career is I love the shooting the mundane. It just gave me a whole new train of thought. I want to walk this back for a moment. I understand that, you obviously work at Google, you previously worked at Adobe, and photography, it sounds like, is your main hobby. And a lot of photographers and a lot of artists, did I have that wrong? Or
I actually, I don't think of it as a hobby.
oh,
And in fact, if you look at my, I think it's my Instagram tagline or whatever it is, I call it photography is a lifestyle. It's a
wow,
lifestyle, like in the sense that a hobby is maybe something that you kind of dabble in. It's a distraction, or it's something to kind of take you away from other things that are going on in your life. I don't look at photography that way. I look at it as it's just the thing that I'm just going to do. It's how I want to. It's how I want to live. It's how I want kind of my existence to be, and being able to produce art and be able to make something. So yeah, I think photography can be a lifestyle, and if especially if it becomes this thing that becomes all encompassing. And what I find is, like, there's this thing of you got to spend 10,000 hours in order to get really good at something, right? If you have a passion for a thing that you're trying to do, and it starts to kind of take root in your brain, and you become obsessed with it, and it just is the thing that you think about, and you look at the world through that lens. Those 10,000 hours just build up naturally. You don't even have to try. It's constantly going on. And so that's how I think about photography.
I I've never heard anybody make the distinction from hobby to lifestyle before. And I want to tell you that I think that that is so powerful and really beautiful and really accurate in a way better way to view it. I agree. Hobby felt like such an undersell for me to even say because it has all these connotations built into it that feel like you're a dabbler. And it's fine to have hobbies in life, but I think that things can start as hobbies, but when they start to grip you, that's when you need to graduate them. You mentioned earlier that you do this for the process. And what does that process mean to you? To me, what I got from it is it's as simple as just connecting with what feels real to you in life. Is that
Yeah.
the process to you in a sentence, or
I think there's two things, and it depends on the subject. So if I'm out doing wildlife photography, and a lot of the wildlife stuff that I do ends up being pretty global. It ends up being all over the world. So whether it's Africa or Antarctica or uh, any other remote place. Uh, I think in the wildlife side, that's exactly true. It's about being able to find a connection to the place that you're in, and to the wildlife that's there, in that place. The landscape and the abstract stuff is a little bit different. What I've been discovering is that it's almost a way of training myself to see and to think and to find interesting things in things that might at first blush not be as interesting. And so it's about being more, maybe it's being more mindful in the place that you're in. And what I'm actually finding is that actually, and it translates to a lot of what you do in other parts of your life. It translates to actually to a lot of how I think about even my job and my work outside of the photography work, which is often about being able you know to dig a little bit deeper and find the real meaning in facts or in things that might just be presented to you, and intended for you to take at face value. And that's what this kind of abstract photography does, is it says it's not just about the face value of what's there. It's, can I find something more, and then can I use my camera to bring that to the forefront and show that to people. So that, and going through that process, I think it just kind of trains, at least it trains me into being able to think more and more like that.
it's actually really meditative by the sound of it. It sounds like
Yeah.
the effect first takes place on you, and I off of that, what is your creative process? Is it I have two questions here. I don't know if you've read a lot of Seth Godin or Stephen Pressfield's work, The War of Art.
Mm-mm.
And they speak often about the difference between being and this ties into your point about being a lifestyle, but it talks about being a dabbler as an artist. Funny to come back to that word, and a professional. And a professional, they show up every day and they face something called the resistance. And the resistance is everything that stands in your way, from procrastination to not feeling inspired to feeling tired, groggy, unimaginative, etc. about your art, and just saying, I'm going to just say screw it and do it anyways, even though I think I'm producing shit work. And like through that, you end up producing great work. And so question one is, what's your process? Do you push yourself to create art even when you don't feel like it? And then two, when you talk about finding beauty in the mundane, what's your North Star? I mean, it feels like it could be very random, like just frankly walking and just catching something catches your eye. Or do you sit down and force yourself to look at, I don't know, a chair? There's a chair on my deck, and so I'm using that and say, let's find the meaning in the chair. I'm curious to know what you do.
Yeah. Maybe to your first question, I'd say it depends. It's ebbed and flowed. It's changed over the years. There are some times where I'm just like, nope, gotta force myself, gotta go do it. And there's something internal also that's kind of driving to go do that. And then there's other times when there's just so much going on that there just isn't time, or there's just that energy just isn't there. And there's a feeling that if I do force myself, it's just not going to be, it's not going to be meditative. It's not going to have the actual outcome, that I'm seeking. Forget about the photographic outcome, but the like experiential outcome, that I'm seeking. So it tends to ebb and flow. Um, it, in terms of I think those subjects, I've done both. I've done stuff where like I do this often, where if I'm out for a walk, for example, if I'm out for a walk, and even if I'm walking through just a path, a bike path, it actually turns out there's a ton of photographic opportunities just even going in that walk, and not photographic in that I'm going to pull out a camera and make a photo, but just I'm just going to frame it. I'm just going to think about what I'm seeing. And so I've just found that it's just become a routine habit in the process of whether it's my commute, or whether it's going for a walk, or even sitting out. Sometimes I'll sit out in the yard, and you kind of, your mind wanders and you stare at a tree or you stare at a plant, and you're like, wait, um, I think I see something there
There's
that I didn't
something
see
there.
before.
There's something
And
there.
then yeah, and you go and you start digging in. And actually, maybe this is going to talk about, like, for me, I had a revelatory experience, kind of influenced by what has been, I'd say, it's my photographic mentor, someone I get to also call a good friend, and that's Art Wolf. And Art has been a photographer for 50 years, and he still gets up every day and is just driven and motivated to go out and make more art. And I was fortunate enough to get to know Art over the pandemic. And when I saw like his way of operating, and a lot of the stuff around being able to go beyond the surface level and see the inner art that can be there, that all comes from Art Wolf. And so when I saw that and got to spend some time with him and got to get a bunch of learning on it, I it just kind of, it opened up my eyes.
I'm just pulling up Art Wolf so I could enjoy some of these, and that's really beautifully said. Oh my goodness, these are stunning.
And he's a prolific photographer across a whole bunch of genres.
Were
So
you guys together this day? Because I know you have a photo really similar to this.
I don't know if it's the exact photo we were together, but yes, Art and I did go to Katmai together when I made that photo.
Wow, look at this. He's fantastic. I can get into photo stories, but I have one more question for you, and it's really in service of other artists and myself. So many times people take something like photography, and I'll use that as an example, and it could be any art, and they want to make it their full-time career,
Hmm.
and they want to make money from it. This is what they want to do. What's been your experience with art being something that is a lifestyle for you, but I don't think you do it for money because you have a job. And also, do you value it and do you treat it mentally and in the way that you walk and live your life more important than what you do at Google? And I'm curious to know your perspective.
Yeah, it's this is something I've also given a lot of thought to. I'll say before photography, my passion was actually in computer programming. It was in writing code, and that's why I chose to pursue that. As for education, and I found that when I started doing it for a living, the way like the way I thought about it and the way in which like what it meant to me ended up changing and shifting, because then this became something that um, again I was doing because I was being paid to. And now it turns out that with software development and coding, it was a very lucrative decision, especially back about 20 years ago when I decided to start doing that. And so I have no regrets. And so when I started then developing an interest in photography, as an art, photography as a form of creative expression, because that's the way I used to think about software development, about coding as well, was it was a form of creative expression, because you're making something, you're just happening to, to type it in a language that a computer can understand. But when I started doing that with photography, I was always cognizant of this feeling of, if it becomes a thing that you're getting paid to do, it kind of robs you of a level of creative freedom and control, over it. So I did, when I back in the early days, I was dabbling and exploring with, well, what if what if I did some wedding photography, and what if I were getting paid, to do that. And I learned very quickly, one, I'm terrible at photographing people, and especially photographing weddings.
So
And then two,
I guess my request for a portrait is off the table then.
oh, I won't do it, man. I am not good at photographing people. I don't know what it is.
I'll make your job 10 times harder. I'm the least photographic person I know. And so, I mean, between your non-portrait skills and my inability to take a good photo, I think we're really setting ourselves up for success.
um, but yeah, but the other thing also is that, like, when you're getting paid to do a wedding, it is I did not find it fun. I did not find it, fulfilling from an art creation perspective. Now, I know a ton of wedding photographers. I have a bunch of friends, who were wedding photographers, and they do, and power to them, if you can do it. But I wasn't. So over the years, I've formed the opinion that I am not going to pursue photography as a money making thing. I'm fortunate enough to have a vocation that can basically pay for my photography. If I think about it, I'm basically, in the in the medieval times, you had artists that had benefactors. So great, I'm my own benefactor, and so I can use my day job to pursue my passion around photography. But I don't want to turn it. I explicitly, even if the option was there, even if somehow somebody said, here's like a bucket of money, just go and now do this photography for me, I wouldn't take it, because I think I know what happens when to that creative process and to that feeling that I get from it, and I don't want to go down that path.
I love that answer. And just as a deeper note, how do you view it then? I mean, so it is a big passion of yours. I personally take that sentiment myself. I view what I do as a producer for clients and on a consulting basis as something that funds this, which is something I really love to do. And I gain a lot of energy from. And there's other form of art that I gain energy from. And in my heart, I view myself as an artist first. And I view myself as, this is what I'm here to do first. And that's how I wake up, and that's how I find fulfillment in life. And I'm curious to know how you see it.
Yeah, I see it the same way. And I think there's a thing you mentioned there, which is you get energy from it, and that's exactly how I feel about how I feel about the photography. It recharges your battery, and you can recharge it in small ways by doing it every day or every weekend. You can recharge it in big ways by just going and having bunch of just focus time, to do photography, but it's a recharging thing.
That's fantastic. I had no idea this segment was going to take as long as it has, but I enjoyed that so deeply. So thank you, Aravind. And I want to get into photo stories. So I'm hoping to get through 3 photos. It's totally cool if we don't, because then I have some broader context stuff. And it was so hard for me to choose the photos I wanted to talk about. If I had you, I would ask you probably a bajillion questions. But I'm going to go back to screen share and let's cross our fingers that I don't close this tab again. There's a reason you work at Google and I don't. So, all right, let me pull this up. Let me pull it up here. Fantastic. Okay. And if you're listening to this, I'll do my best to describe the photo, but I know this is a gimme because this is the first one that was on your website, and I didn't choose it for that reason. It just really spoke to me, and all of your photos in this region spoke to me. I think it was South Africa that you took,
Yep.
And I just thought it was so intimate and beautiful, and I wanted to talk to you about that. So my first question is, I kind of ruined it, but where were you exactly when you took it?
Yeah, so this photo was taken in a part of South Africa that's close to it's in the northwest. I always have to think in my mind which way is east and which way is west. It's in the northwest, so on the edge of the Kalahari Desert. It's an area called Swalu, and it's a reserve. It's a reserve. It's a protected wildlife area, and they offer the ability for people to come and stay there and then be able to go out and find wildlife. And Swalu is one of the places where there is a protected a group of rhinos, that are there, and you have no guarantee of seeing these incredible, amazing creatures, but we were fortunate. We went out and we were able to find a whole group of them, including some babies and some young ones, and just got to spend a bunch of time with a crusher rhino.
What's it like in Swalu? I mean, it sounds desolate and it sounds remote. I mean, what's the food there? What's the people like there? Who are you with? Were you traveling alone? Were you scared to be there? I mean, um, I'd be a little nervous being in a place like that, and also being with these. How close were you? I mean, my questions go on.
Yeah, so I've done a bunch of safaris in Africa, all over Africa. It's very different. Like the different countries are very different. Of course, the people are different. The wildlife is different. The wildlife is also habituated differently. There are some that are pretty comfortable with people being around, and there's others that are very skittish. Now, in this case, so this was a trip with a few friends that I'd actually met on other trips, and we kind of got to know each other. They're all kind of budding photographers, and so we were on this trip together. We stayed at a camp, and it's a permanent camp, and it's a very very luxurious camp. You've got all your creature comforts that you need, and then we go out in vehicles, in game vehicles, and a lot of times the wildlife is habituated enough to know that the game vehicle is not a threat. It's both not food and it's not a threat.
Is the game
And
vehicle like the classic, what I would think it to be, like a literal Jeep Safari kind of
yeah,
open door concept type of thing?
yeah, they're usually like Land Cruisers or Land Rovers, and yeah, those open Land Rovers is what they are, and of course, we have both drivers and spotters that are very respectful of the wildlife, maintain a respectful distance. There's a way in which you can not necessarily approach, but you can figure out where they're going to go, like where's the wildlife going to go, and then position yourself so that you're prepared, so that you're not constantly chasing after the animals themselves, but you're able to anticipate kind of, are they going to come out of that that opening from behind that bush, and then is the light right? Are you in the right position for the light? And then you can position yourself at the right place, and then they kill the engine, and you sit there and you've got your camera in here, and you wait, and
And
then
are you in this tall grass on the savannas, like posted up with a tripod? Are you in what are you?
no, it's all handheld. You don't get off the vehicles, so because they're habituated to know that the vehicles are not a threat. If you get off the vehicles, that tends to throw the whole situation out of whack.
Have you
So
ever seen have you ever seen an attack, or have you ever seen like an animal get outraged, and has that ever been part of your experience?
I've seen elephants get annoyed. Maybe is the best way to put it. Um, and sometimes, especially with elephants, the matriarch can get annoyed if she's got a really young one, and you definitely don't want to get between, of course, a mother and its child. That can cause a bunch of situations. And then I've also seen young bull elephants uh, who are just posturing. So it's not really, it can become a dangerous situation, but they're just trying to kind of assert their dominance, and will trumpet and they'll flare their ears and do stuff like that. But other than that, I haven't seen attacks and things like that. All the people that I travel with, all of the guides and people that we work with are very, very knowledgeable and respectful of the animals.
And so, are you ever afraid when you're shooting these things? And maybe along some of the first times, where would I find? I want to pull up one of the photos of that beautiful tiger that you shot. Is that in the
Oh,
photos?
the tiger would be India. India is the only place to photograph tigers.
Right, and it looked like it was in the middle of a jungle. Yeah, like things like
Yeah.
this, right? So, I mean, look at this. I mean, are you ever a little bit nervous or afraid? And I mean, this is a really wild creature that is vicious and majestic and beautiful. Where were you here? What were you doing? Were you afraid?
I think that's why I seek out the like the creatures. It's that combination of majesty, beauty, but then also knowing that if if they really wanted, they could probably like rip your face off, right? But this was in a park in India called Bandhavgarh. It's in central India, and it's a dedicated tiger reserve. And very similar to the African parks, you have a jeep vehicle, and then you go into the park looking for the tigers. And I've been doing this for like doing safaris and trips like that for about 12 years or so. And over the years, you do start to develop um, some level of comfort, and kind of there's you start to develop that rational sense of like, yeah, I'm pretty safe in this vehicle because like this is the way in which it works and it has worked. I certainly in the early days, certainly the very first time you ever go out on a game drive, it is absolutely frightening because you're like, wait, like I'm here. And the very first time I did, it was in Tanzania, where we were in one of these vehicles, and there's a big male lion that just comes up and walks literally right by the vehicle. And of course, he doesn't do anything because that's, like they won't. But it's the very first time, and you're sitting there, and you're like, there is only 4 feet and a bit of aluminum between me and this lion, and there's a part of you that's scared for sure.
Oh my gosh, that's wild. What is it? Well, first of all, how far are you generally? Are you using a really big lens?
It depends. So this particular image, this was probably shot with about like I'm tempted to say like a 600 millimeter equivalent or so, 600, 800, something like that. The tigers in India tend to be a little bit further away, but there's other images where they're a lot closer. Like I've photographed it with a 70 to 200 because they're just much more comfortable. A
Wow.
lot of times, like lions, groups of lions in Africa, they'll be pretty chill. They can be pretty comfortable, and you can be like 10 feet, 20 feet, away from them and photograph them.
That is unbelievable. And what does it feel like connecting with these animals? When like, it really looks like, I know you're far away, but it almost looks like it looks like it's looking right at your lens.
Yep.
And so what does that feel like in your heart?
It's it's a mixture of a bunch of feelings. There's one is just is knowing there is something about looking another creature in the eye and knowing that there's something else that's alive looking back to you. I mean, it's the same reason why when we talk to people, we look them in the eye as well, right? It makes a connection, with people. So there is that element, but then there's all kinds of thoughts that race through my mind of like, yeah, I wonder what's it thinking about? Is it like, what is it thinking about looking back at me? Does it see me as this person, as this thing? Does it just see the vehicle? Is it just curious in terms of what we are, or is it just completely ignoring us and it's on a mission to find food or whatever it is it's going to do? So it's just a bunch of questions in what's happening there, what's going on.
Have you ever felt acknowledged, like as though it acknowledged you? And
Oh
what
yeah.
what does that
I,
feel like? Because then you're confirmed in its presence.
Yes, and actually, there's multiple experiences. So this is on a vehicle. I've done wildlife experiences that are on foot, as well.
Can you
Those are
can I pull one up while we're talking?
yeah. If you go to Alaska, um, those are all on foot. So all of these photographs with the bears are all on foot,
This is one.
and
This is one of your most famous ones for obvious reasons.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep. That's up on a cliff, looking down. But like the big mama bear and the cubs, we were probably about maybe 20 feet away from them. Again on foot, and you especially the cubs, when they're looking at you, they see you, because the older bears are these bears at this time of year when the salmon run is happening are relatively acclimated to humans. Basically, the salmon is more interesting food than humans are, and humans by the most are not a threat to them, so they just kind of ignore you. Except the little babies, though, they don't know humans, and so they are looking at you going, hey, what are you? Like the one with the bear standing up, that's what the adolescent bears do, but because they're trying to get a better view, because they're like, hey, there's something over there. I'm going to stand up on my two legs. And I mean, this is kind of anthropomorphizing them, where it looks like they're waving at you. They're not actually waving, they're just trying to maintain balance as they stand and kind of wobble, on 2 feet, but they're trying to get a better vantage. Now, why would they get a better vantage? Because they know that I'm there, and they're just trying to see. They're curious. They're like, hey, what is this? What is this creature, this thing? And they're taking a look. So it's a definite acknowledgement
And
that you're there.
do you feel? I mean, how is this? I mean, it's okay if you don't have. You strike me as very thoughtful. I'm sure that you do have a thought here. I'm not sure if you want to share it, but how does this broaden your perspective? And I don't have like a big dog in this race. I'm not asking this to pin you or to get a piece here. I'm actually really curious. How does this? Sometimes when I look at images like this, it makes me feel that we're not alone on this earth, and we share it, and our responsibility as people is to act like we share it and act like there's other beings here that deserve just as much as we do to enjoy their time here and to live a good life, whatever that means for them.
Mm-hmm.
And how does this, when they acknowledge you, does it build a well of compassion and connection and reverence for them, or what does it do to you as a person?
I don't think it's not just the acknowledgement. For me, it's just being able to be there and just see them, and see them in their natural habitat, see them go about their day. Like those are the things that builds. I agree with you on all the things that you said. It's we're definitely not alone, on this planet. We definitely, as kind of the apex species on the planet, have a responsibility to preserve it and to take care of all of the other species that we occupy this planet with. But just being able to be there and see them in their habitat, see them go through their natural life cycle, and that life cycle isn't always just beauty and majesty and cuteness. That life cycle can be brutal, at times, and that's the way that nature is. But just being able to be there, that's what for me forms and drives that connection.
Yeah, I love that. And sometimes in my heart's eye, I think to myself, and I think as the apex predator here, I mean, we have this responsibility to, I mean, I don't know whether this is true or not, but this is how I think about it. And I almost think sometimes animals look to us and they're like, just, we're looking to you to help us and to, save this place and get it right, because, whether you choose to admit it or not, like this earth would be a lot healthier as a whole, more than likely, without humans.
Yeah.
And it would really die without a lot of these animals. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually, and as you were saying that, that was the thought that was going through my mind is, it's like, the animals aren't looking at us to save them from themselves or to save them from other externalities. It's really to save them from us, right? And all of the threats that wildlife everywhere faces are really caused by humans. Now, whether that's climate change, or whether that's hunting, or other human activities, or like habitat encroachment. There's a multitude of problems that different wildlife all over the planet faces, but they all are kind of root caused in how the kind of presence that we have here.
Yeah, very true. My goodness, we're only on photo 1. I'm gonna pull up photo 2 really quickly, which is the photo that you shared with me, and I was surprised to see this as your favorite. I think for obvious reason. I don't actually know what it is. It looks like I'm looking at a rock. I don't. And so, why don't you tell me why this is the
Yeah,
thought that inspired you the most? And yeah.
this is and this is because this is the direction in which my photography and the way I'm thinking about it, and the art, all that stuff, is going now. Um, this photograph, and I said that because every time I look at this photograph, I feel it evokes that emotion of, or that perspective of looking deeper, looking beyond just the surface level, the obvious. It's obviously it is an abstract photograph. It's intended for the viewer to be able to find whatever it is that they want to find in it. But for me, the experience of making this photograph. So this is in a beach that is relatively near, where I live. It's a highly frequented beach. There's a lot of people that go there. I'm sure that over the years, tens of thousands of people have walked by this spot and probably never seen this. um, when I was making this photograph, or when I even went out to the beach, I didn't go out with an intention of I'm gonna go make this photograph. I went out with an intention of I'm gonna go for a stroll. It's the morning. I think it was like 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., something like that, and I'm gonna go and see what I can see. And so I'm walking around this beach with my big rubber boots to just in case the waves come in, and I'm just walking around with my camera tripod, seeing what I can see. And I saw this, and this is on a cliff, and I saw this, and I thought I saw something here that was going to be interesting, and so I set up my camera and everything, and started figuring out my composition and movements and all that stuff to get everything dialed in. And what I love is that behind me is the scene that probably every other photographer would be photographing, because it's, you've got waves, and you've got rocks, and you've got the sun that's just, coming up over the horizon, and it's lighting up all these clouds and turning them pink, and it's like the postcard that you'd want is behind me. But it's very obvious, but it's an obvious beautiful sunrise. And here I was just fascinated by, there's all of this, of course there's color and there's texture, and I can't unsee. I see eyes. I see a face that's been distorted over a millennia, and I see like a pair of eyes that are drifting and moving apart. And so I think of this as it's art that like geology has made, just waiting to be discovered, and a part of this cliff had eroded enough for me to come and discover it. The different layers of rock have been moving against each other for thousands of years to get to this point again, for me to go and discover it. So all of those things, the experience of seeing something that is beyond the obvious, the experience of making a piece of art that at the same time is the opposite of what would be a typically great photograph. And then every time I look at it, seeing eyes, or seeing faces, or seeing things in there that I haven't seen before. That's why, I keep coming back to it.
That is just such a pure, thoughtful answer. And I can't say I see that. I can't say I feel the same, but I don't think I'm meant to. I mean, it's it's in the beauty of the beholder. And I think that that's lovely. What I loved about that I hope people take from it, that at least I took, was the idea that the shot that everybody wanted to get was quote unquote behind you, and you chose to turn around, and that the line that comes to heart is the grass is always greener. And sometimes you don't need to look further than your own situation and circumstances to find happiness, to find fulfillment, to find goodness, to find a good life. And that's what I got from that, which
Yeah.
is which is beautiful. I'm taking notes if you see me with a pen. Uh, I'm gonna anything else you want to share about this before I flip to the next photo?
No, that's and you're exactly right. And I find this actually, and not just this photo, but especially a lot of the abstract work tends to be more for me, necessarily. And some of it, you sometimes just encounter somebody who just they click with it, and it just resonates so much with them. And then for the vast majority of people, it's meaningless,
Yeah,
and that's okay.
but that's the idea behind abstract work. It's just that
Yeah,
the beauty is within your own making. It took me a while to find a landscape I wanted to choose, and I actually I didn't want to choose this one because I had so many, but I had to choose this one. Like I didn't want to, but I had to, is how I felt. And the reason I had to is what strikes me in this photo is what's it like being on these landscapes? I mean, you've been on savannas in Africa, you've been in the jungles of India, and this is somewhere either in the South or North Arctic Ocean, I'm assuming, and
so
South, and it feels
yeah,
so desolate. And you can see these penguins on this rock, and I'm just thinking to myself, it feels ominous and scary and real, and I just don't know the words that I have for it. And so I'm just curious to know, where were you? What were you doing? Who are you with? What did it feel like
yeah.
being here? What does it feel like being on these landscapes?
So that's in Antarctica, and Antarctica is, I mean, there's a lot of places in the world that are unlike any other place, but Antarctica is one of those places. It's just unlike anything else. It's exactly all those things that you said. It is desolate and beautiful, and you've got like penguins that are just fascinating creatures, fascinating wildlife. You've got Antarctica is just filled with dramatic weather all the time, and you have a combination of all of those things. So that that iceberg, and the other thing that's interesting about icebergs is they're only like 10% of the iceberg is above the water, right? And so you have this whole other mountain underneath that iceberg, and what happens is over time the iceberg will flip, right? And that's how you get all the different layerings and stuff that's on that iceberg. So it's just a fascinating place. This is it was on a ship. That's for the most part that's the really the only way to get to Antarctica. There are some flights that are happening, but really you go on a ship. And when you're on a ship and when you're sailing, you will just encounter these icebergs, and then it's up to you to kind of see what kind of art you want to make with it.
Were you just on like a regular? I know there's a lot of cruises that go to South Antarctica, and they're
Yeah.
by and large like they're cruises. Is that where you were on, or were you on like a photographer's expedition, or?
Yeah, this is a photographer's expedition. So I have actually I've been on many ships. I have never done an actual cruise. All of the ship journeys I've done have been on photography expeditions. But yeah, that's what this was. We were a group of. This is a smaller. The photography expeditions tend to be smaller ships, so smaller by the scale of ships. So we only had about I think about 60 or 70 passengers, all photographers. So the itinerary was oriented around that, and something like this, you'll encounter a gigantic tabular iceberg, and we'll slow down and take the time to to make photographs.
It's beautiful. And was this in the Drake's Passage, or?
This is not the Drake Passage. It was closer to the Antarctic mainland.
Got it. Is it like, is it choppy there? The water? I sometimes I get a little seasick.
It is very choppy. So I've sailed to Antarctica, I think about 3 or 4 times now, and every time has been different. None of them were calm. The roughest time I've ever encountered was we were hitting gale force winds in the Drake Passage so much so that the ship was basically rolling by about 45 degrees, and
Were you
and it was like it was well, I was like that for 2 days. So it's just hard to sleep. It's like how do you sleep when when you have that kind of rolling going
were
on.
you nervous? I mean, I would be a little afraid.
I was nervous of basically falling out of my seat, of having something go flying across the room, and hit me, but not nervous that anything was going to happen to the ship. I had confidence that
Got it. It
in the
wasn't that big.
captain.
Fair enough. Okay, so in the limited time that we have, I wanna do some rapid fire. These weren't meant to be rapid fire, but I really want to get through them, and we'll get through what we do and what we don't. I'm gonna kill my screen share for a moment. Beautiful photography, by the way, and thank you again for letting me showcase it here. Okay, is there anything you chose and you actively choose not to shoot, and why?
Um, I will photograph just about anything. Uh, in terms of like the things I actively pursue, I'm actively pursuing things that can be new,
I
things I haven't
actually,
done before.
I actually more so mean it as like you're on a safari and you just feel like this would be a great photo, but it doesn't feel humane to take this photo or right to take this photo.
There's several of those. I early in the early days I photographed kills. I don't photograph kills anymore. It doesn't do anything for me. I think it's something you can experience. It's a part of the life cycle of nature, but I've never found it to be a meaningful photograph that's come out of it, or an animal on a kill. I just haven't found it to be as meaningful, of a photograph. I have photographed it before. I don't do that,
Got it.
as much now.
That's a fair answer. I like that. What shot started your photography career, and were you the one that took it?
um, it's a. I've been thinking about this. It's a tough question. Um, I, I'd say yes. Yes to the second question. Yes, I was the one that took it. And I think what started it for me was um, more mundane. It's really uh, test shots to understand how to use a camera to get the results that you want, how to use depth of field and how to use shutter speeds and things like that. And the reason I say it kind of kickstarted the career is because that's what made me realize that a camera isn't just a documentation tool, but is a tool for actually making art. So I think
That's
yeah,
a beautiful
that's
answer.
one
I,
thing.
I can relate to that. This you might not have an answer to, but is there a shot that almost ended your career?
Well, I think in order to end the career, it would probably have to end my life. And by and large, I don't, put myself in that situation. But yeah, there have been times that it's been nerve wracking. Like the bears in Alaska, we because of the way it works, you have to go in and out on a float plane, which is all dependent on the wind and the weather conditions, and weather conditions can change. For a moment, we thought that there was going to be a storm that was going to come in, and we'd be trapped out on, out on this island with a bunch of these bears overnight. And so I don't know,
You
maybe
guys have tents and
that's the
shit,
closest.
or were you guys just
Well, we'd have to go find emergency supplies somewhere and try to
where
pitch a
would you
tent.
find emergency supplies? Are there people that live there?
Well, fortunately, the people that organize it have caches of supplies that they set out
Oh my
for that, exactly for that reason, because it apparently happens more often than you think
god,
that you get stuck.
that is wild. Next question is what shot inspired you the most that someone else took?
Um, I would say there's a photographer by the name of Elliot Porter. I'm not going to give the exact shot, but there's a couple of different books that for me inspired me on the path of like abstract photography in nature. And he just has a bunch of amazing work. And he was a photographer uh, several years ago. So if you look at some of his, like especially some of the trees and the kind of ethereal nature of it, uh, that's what kind of kicked off the
Wow.
abstract
Why not give the exact photo out of curiosity? Is it just close to your heart and you don't want to share it?
It's just no. I don't think there's an exact one. There's just there's a body of work. I have one of his books here, on my bookshelf, and I do pull it out and look through it. I don't think I can distill it down to a single photograph.
Got it. That's another fair answer. I love it. What shot do you wish everyone could see?
Well, all of my shots are on the on my website, so everyone can see it.
Yeah.
I would say it it's again, it's those abstract images where I have a connection to it and I see something. I wish everyone could see that, and obviously everyone can't. Right? Can truly see. It's not just about seeing the pixels on the screen, but seeing the deeper thing that motivated me to want to go and photograph it. It'd be great if people could see that, but I know not everyone's going
That's
to be
just
able
not
to see
how
it.
it always is. What's the shot that you wish you took?
I don't. A shot you wish you took implies that there's some kind of a regret there of something, and I just don't. It just doesn't happen. I am more of a forager in the sense that I will go out and try to find images. So it's not like it's not like you even know what else you could have taken, because I just don't know, because I went out looking for things. I found some things. Maybe there was some other stuff that I didn't find, but I don't know it, so there's no regret around it.
Beautiful. I know that we're at time. Do you have a heart out?
No, I don't. I don't have hard stuff.
Okay, I very much don't intend to wrap this in the next 2 minutes, though, so I don't take up your whole day and Google doesn't get mad at you. I don't want that. But is there a shot that you're looking for? This might piggyback off your previous answer.
No, I think again it's the same thing. I'm a forager, so I will go out and try to find something. The thing I'm always looking for is something that hasn't been done before. I think that's the thing. It's something that hasn't really been done in that particular way, or seen in that particular way. So that's what I'm usually after.
Beautiful. Okay, I have one last question, but before I ask it, what's next for you, and where can folks reach you and find you? And do you have anything that you want to promote or share?
No, you can find me on on my website, akimagery.com, and or on Instagram, also at akimagery. And in terms of what's next, I'm always shooting. I'm always trying to figure out what the next like wildlife target or area will be. I've got a few things planned. I'm not gonna spill the beans yet, but there'll be some more, I think, new and interesting images coming in 2024 and 2025.
I can't wait. My final question, and then I have a question for you to give me, is what have you learned? We kind of covered this, but I'm curious to know your macro answer. What have you learned from being in these environments? Or what I'm really looking for is, what message would you like to share with the world that you've picked up through being who you are and being around the things you have?
I think the biggest learning and the message is there is so much more to the world, and there's so much more that's going on beyond just what we see and do every day. Like we get into our rhythms and our traps every day of the stuff that's around us, but what's around us is just such a small part of everything else that's out there. And I would just say, I know not everyone has the means or the time or the ability to go out and seek it all out, but as much as you can, seek it out and kind of see it and experience it with your own eyes. That's what creates that connection to the broader planet. And that's why I keep doing it. That's why, in spite of having gone to a bunch of different places and seen as much as I've been fortunate enough to be able to see, I'm still going to do, more of it, because every time, I learn something new or I experience something new. And I just encourage everybody to try that out.
Is that why you continue to do it? Because of the connection it gives you and
Yeah.
the reminded perspective? Do you feel it really like affects the way that you live, and it humbles you, and it feels as though it does that to me, and so I'd imagine that it must do that to you?
Absolutely, yeah. It absolutely humbles me, and I find I have to do it regularly because it's a reminder, right? Like it's very easy to come back to again your everyday ordinary routine, and start to forget about everything else that's out there. So I have to do it periodically. I know, there's others who are fortunate enough that they can do this, on a regular basis, or maybe even live their lives in a way where they're just nomadic and just be a citizen of the world as it is, which is fantastic if you can do it. But I can't do that. But I can do this and kind of use it as a regular reminder to kind of ground myself.
What word would you assign it? For me, it's like word or sentence. I mean, for me, it brings me back. It connects me to what matters. Is there like a word or a way that you describe what it does for you?
No, I think connection is the right word. I The question is, it's connect you to what? And I think it's more connection to, uh, it's connection to everything, connection to the planet, connection to a this you can think of the planet that we're on and all the animals, all the creatures, all of it as one gigantic organism, including ours, and maybe it's a connection to that organism.
It's really beautiful. We have a tradition on this show that I totally and shamelessly stole from another show, which is they get to ask the question for the next guest. The guest on before you was actually a friend of mine. I don't know if you know the angel Jason Calacanis. I'm just making.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. And so he was
I've heard of him. Yeah.
he's the chief of staff for Jason. And he asked, is there a defining moment in your career that led to where you are? I think we cover that in some ways, but I'm curious to know if you have a different answer.
Um, I don't think it's a defining moment, um, because that kind of implies that everything rests on a uh, single instance of something that happened, and maybe there are examples of single instances, but I think of everything in my career, having has been I've just kind of followed what's been interesting and what's piqued my curiosity, and that's what led to. I mean, that's what started, like software development and computer programming, and that's what led to photography, and it's what led to joining Adobe, and it's what led to going to Google. It's like all of these things have just been around having a mind state of curiosity. So I don't think it's just a single moment of a thing happened and then everything flipped beyond it.
It's beautiful. And I think I would define that as just, for me, it's always been follow what you might not know what excites you, but you probably have a few like faint interests at the very least. And if you follow those, it feels as though you go through that door and more opens to you and more life opens to you, and interest graduates into curiosity, which graduates to genuine interest, and then excitement, and then passion, and then all of a sudden you're doing something you feel very intentional and purposeful. But has that been your experience as well? Just kind of
Yeah,
following that?
yeah, absolutely. And I think curiosity is the root. It's the root of all that. I think if you lose the curiosity, then I think you just kind of die. There's nothing else there. Yeah.
I definitely agree. What is your question for the next guest?
My question would be, and this is uh, maybe this is one of my favorite questions, especially to ask people who have. Hopefully, your next guest is somebody who's really successful and accomplished. My question would be, what is the biggest mistake that you've made, and what have you learned from it?
You've made, and what have you learned from it? I love that. I think like what's missing from the space and audio that I'm trying to bring back to it is storytelling, and that has like a real beautiful story to it, just baked into the question. Aravind, I want to thank you. I think, through photography, what sits in front of me is a really beautiful person who's learned to appreciate what I think life is about. And it's about connection, and it's about having a sense of respect for, of course, yourself and definitely others. And also, what often gets left out of that sentence is the world around you and the species around you and the climates around you and the environments around you. And your work has spoken to me and it's touched my heart. Thank you for doing what you do. I know you don't do it for me. I think you do it for yourself, but it's had a really profound impact on me. And also you just being here with me for, the past however long, 90 minutes has just been lovely. and I've enjoyed it very deeply. And if you're looking to learn more about Aravind, I'll link everything in the show notes so you can check out his website, his Instagram. And thank you again, man. I've really enjoyed this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Nick. This has been, it's been an amazing conversation.
Cool. Fantastic. I'll see you soon. Hang up for 1 second.